YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video I'm going to be counting down the top 10 most memorable death scenes in horror movies. So 10 death scenes that have always stuck with me over the years, either because they were particularly gory or mean-spirited, or if they were just straight up cool scenes. So go through 10 of my personal most memorable death scenes. So because of the nature of this video, we are going to be covering a bit of gruesome content, and spoiler alert, but to be honest, these are so iconic, I don't think I'll be ruining things for anyone. So, top 10 most memorable death scenes in horror movies. Let's get straight to it. In at number 10, we have Jaws and the death of Chrissy Watkins. Now, I wasn't going to include Jaws, so try not to talk about it all the time, with it being my favourite movie. But this scene has always stuck with me since being a kid. And I've never talked about this particular part of the movie. So, Chrissy Watkins, she is the first character that we're introduced to in this movie. And she is, of course, going for a swim and becomes the first victim that we know of Bruce the Shark in one of the most terrifying scenes I think there is in cinema. People say to me, Jaws isn't a horror film. It's like, dude, watch the first 5 minutes of Jaws and tell me what you think. But it's Chrissy's death in the movie, her being killed by the shark, is just a amazing example of terrifying the audience really early on in the film, but without doing it in an over-the-top, in-your-face way. It's very subtle in terms of you can't see under the water, and of course it lets the imagination run wild, which is more terrifying than a giant shark jumping out and revealing itself straight away. Which was actually Steven Spielberg's original idea. He wanted a grand beginning to the film where the shark jumps straight out, but of course we all know the technical difficulties of Bruce. That didn't happen, but made for a way more intense and scary scene. And so yeah, every time I watch Jaws, even though I've seen it hundreds of times, Chrissy Watkins' death always gets to me. It's really scary. Now, there were quite a few urban legends floating around over the years that Chrissy Watkins, or Susan Backliney, who played the actress, was genuinely in pain and injured during that scene, and her cries for help were somewhat genuine, which is a pretty horrifying thought. Over the years, I've heard that that wasn't the case, and the last time I looked this up and saw a bit of an interview from Chrissy Watkins, she never mentioned it or anything like that, so I don't know how true that is. But in reality, she had ropes attached to her where people under the water and on the beach would run up and down and pull her around, which made it look like she was being attacked by the shark. But yes, I don't think you can deny the raw, primal fear that Chrissy Watkins' death instills in people, and is still a really unpleasant scene to watch, even now. In at number 9, we have Scream and the death of Casey Becker. Again, another intro into a movie, and this one sees Casey, played by Drew Barrymore, gets an innocuous phone call, which starts out kind of innocent and playful, and then gets a bit more sinister as the phone calls carry on, and then gets downright terrifying as it's revealed that Ghostface is on the other end of the phone and starts stalking her on the phone and then around and in the house. And this is a scene that has always creeped me out and scared me. The layers of tension that Wes Craven adds on to this scene is unrelenting, and yet it always gets to me. Now, when I was kind of growing up, you don't really have it now, but the household phones, everyone has sort of mobiles and cell phones now, but we all had household phones, and they always had that high-pitched, shrill ringing noise whenever anyone called, and it was kind of intrusive and made you stop and wonder who it was that was there. And yeah, this is just like a nightmare scenario of that, and just exploring that to the max in terms of scariness. And at the time, Drew Barrymore still is a big star, so it was kind of crazy to see her become a victim like that in the way that she did. And it's a tough scene, because like towards the end of that opening, she almost makes it, and you think she's going to, and then she doesn't quite, and then she does become the first victim of Ghostface in this franchise. But yeah, the death of Casey in this is always guaranteed to scare me every time I watch Scream. So yeah, really well done death scene, and one that's always stuck with me over the years, especially when the phone rings. Next up we have Night of the Living Dead and the death of Ben. Ben is our stoic hero who leads the group in the fight against the zombies that are taking over, and he's a great character and survives. He survives the whole night of the Living Dead, only to emerge the next day and be shot by the townsfolk who are clearing the scene up after the zombies have been contained. It's a huge kick in the gut, this scene is, and then the way that Ben is killed off so cheaply, and such a downbeat and nihilistic end to a great film. Great ending. It's effective in what it sets out to do, but boy, it's like, man. And it also, as well, interestingly, it opens up a captivating discussion of, you know, whether they thought that Ben was a zombie and then they mistakenly shot him, or, you know, unfortunately, if they saw the colour of his skin and shot him for that reason, because, you know, those kind of things were rife at the time of Night of the Living Dead. So yeah, a sucker punch of an ending, very effective ending, and again raises some interesting kind of social, racial questions, which, as would have been prevalent at the time. So very, very clever way to end Night of the Living Dead, albeit totally devastating. At number 7, we're sticking with George Romero with Day of the Dead, and instead of the questionable subtleties of Ben's death, we go to the full-on gross-out, gory death of General Rhodes. Now, General Rhodes in Day of the Dead, played amazingly by Joe Pilato. He should have got more recognition in the acting world for his portrayal of General Rhodes. He has kind of taken by force command of this underground research facility. It's now under military jurisdiction, and he's in charge, and the guy is just absolutely psycho. Very, very much a loose cannon, short temper, and all kinds of unpleasant things going on with him, and he sort of rules by fear. He's actually scarier in this film than what the zombies are. But at the end of the film, General Rhodes, he does get overcome by the zombies, and they get on him and they basically tear him apart. They tear him in two, pull out his guts, and chomp away while he's still alive, only for General Rhodes to gurgle out the words "choke" on them as they eat his intestines, which just about sums up the bitterness of that character and his hate-filled view of everyone around him. But yeah, General Rhodes, amazing character and spectacularly gory death in one of the best zombie films there is, in my opinion. Next up, at number 6, we have Cannibal Holocaust. Now, with this movie, pick a death and you are sure to have a gruesome, cruel, nasty, horrible death to hand. So any of them in this film could have qualified for this video. I'm going to go for the death of Faye, who is part of the cocky and morally questionable documentary crew who go into the Amazon to find evidence of cannibals, but do it in a really awful way and do anything for a sort of sensationalistic angle. And at the end of this movie, the net closes in on them and the cannibals close in on them, and they are cornered and they are all brutally murdered through the lens of this handheld camera. Now, Faye, I got to watch how I describe it because YouTube will probably flag me, but she is taken off and violated by a gang of cannibals, beaten, and then has her head locked off. all in graphic yet grainy handheld camera footage, which makes it look even worse and brings a horrible sense of realism to that scene. And that's the one that I just remember thinking, my goodness, that the thought of all these cannibals just grabbing you and doing what they do to that character is just pretty horrific. And yeah, one that's always stayed with me. It's a very, very unpleasant and hard to watch end to a movie, but amazingly well done and horrifyingly real. So yeah, I wanted to include one of those deaths in this video. Okay, next up is, I wanted to include something from the Friday the 13th franchise. It's my favourite horror franchise, and I have great memories of watching this when I was growing up and a teenager, and a lot of the deaths in this are very memorable. Kevin Bacon's death, for example, is a great one. But I'm going to go with Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter, and I'm going to go with one that maybe technically I'm wrong about this, but I don't know. Let me know what you think. But I'm going to go with the death of Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Now, I know you could argue the case that he's not in Part 5, but Jason comes back in Part 6 and is in however many more movies. But Part 4 to Part 6 mark a clear transition for me from kind of human Jason, albeit a little bit deformed, the human Jason to undead zombie Jason in Part 6. And he even comes back from beyond the grave at the beginning of Part 6. So by that movie, he very much is dead and he's killed in the final chapter. So that's my reasoning for this one. But his death, if you'll accept that, in this movie is so cool. He is absolutely gets the stuffing beaten out of him by Corey Feldman. And then, of course, there is the machete to the side of his face where he falls forward and then his head slides down the machete. But what's amazing about that is the effects from Tom Savini of Jason's facial features moving as he slides down the machete. It's not just like a fake head that slides down. It has expression and all sorts going on his face, which is just incredible. It's one of the coolest effects I've ever seen and one of the most awesome deaths in the Friday the 13th franchise, and is just a marvel of like gore and special effects. So it is one that is always has stuck with me. And you know, if Jason was to get killed, that is an awesome way for him to go out, but it is cool that he comes back. So yeah, Friday the 13th, final chapter, Jason's death, absolutely awesome. You've got to check it out if you haven't done so already. It's worth noting as well that Ted White, who played Jason in the final chapter, did not get on with Corey Feldman. I think Ted White was a old school country boy stuntman, and their personalities just didn't sync up. But they did come together really well and created a great scene which depicted the death of Jason in this movie. Next up at number 4, we have Zombie Flesh Eaters, aka Zombie, and the death of Paula Menard. Now, Paula was the long-suffering wife of Dr. Menard in this movie. She hated what he was doing and thought he was creating all these monsters and whatnot. And she did have a point, to be fair, although she did it in quite a rambling kind of way. And in the most infamous scene in the movie, where she's hiding from a zombie in the closet, zombie breaks through, grabs her head, slowly pulls her towards the broken door, and she is impaled by the eye in gruesome, spectacular fashion. Now, you could argue, a bit like the Jason thing, that's not actually the death in this movie. I don't think she gets killed from that particular moment, but you do see a bit later dead on the table being eaten by the zombies. So I'm counting this for that reason. I had to put it in this video because when I first saw this movie, and I was only kind of like a young kid, and that scene absolutely blew me away. And you can argue whether kids should be watching movies like this, but I wasn't scared or horrified like that. I was just marveled because I'd never seen anything portrayed on screen like that moment, and I appreciated it for the special effects and the cinematography and the setup and all the work that had gone behind it. And it just blew my mind and has stayed with me all these years, as I'm sure it has with a lot of you guys. But Lucio Fulci certainly had a thing about eyeballs and the penetration of eyeballs, and this is definitely his magnum opus of those kind of effects. But yeah, just unbelievably awesome effects in that one, and yeah, a crazy moment in a film that has a lot of crazy set pieces. Yeah, it's just one of the most memorable things that I've ever seen on screen. Okay, we are into the top three. And at number 3, we have Scanners. And I'm sure you all know where I'm going with this one. I have said before, I'm not a huge fan of Scanners. I struggle with this movie. I struggle to get in with it. But there is one moment in this movie which is just unbelievably, insanely awesome. And it is, of course, the head exploding scene. So Scanners tells the story of these people with the ability to have this kind of telekinetic power within their thoughts, and they can control people and things like that. And one of the people that can do this is Michael Ironside in a really sinister role for him. And he goes to like a seminar or something where someone's doing a talk on this very ability and claims he can do it, and wants a volunteer from the audience. And Michael Ironside volunteers himself in a very unassuming kind of way, and they have this telekinetic face-off, which results in the famous scene of the guy's head blowing up in spectacular fashion. And of course, that's a memorable scene. It's going to stay with anyone that sees that. But I also really love this scene in terms of how the two actors convey this internal head struggle without any dialogue and making very few sounds. It's a really interesting scene and a great example of acting in an alternative fashion. I really like it for that. The head explosion itself was made up, it was a fake head, and it was packed with all kind of junk and food colouring, and they blasted it from behind with a shotgun. So that's how they did that amazing practical effect. But yeah, Scanners for me, a film that I struggle with, but my goodness, it's the best exploding head scene you'll ever see in cinema. In at number 2, we have Alien and the Death of Kane. So Kane is a crew member on the Nostromo spaceship. He's the one that goes out to check out the alien colony and finds the egg and gets the face hugger suctioned onto his face, and seems to be in a bad way, but the crew do manage to get it off, or it dies and releases itself, and then Kane seems fine, and they all get together for dinner on the ship and get a uninvited dinner guest in the form of the xenomorph chest burster, which bursts out from Kane in a horrible, horrible way. The chest burster, and the notion of that is a really painful idea. It's always got to me over the years. I'm always clutching my chest whenever a chest burster is in one of the Alien scenes, and John Hurt acts it out in a horribly convincing manner. Now, the cast and crew of Alien didn't actually know what the chest burster was or what it would look like, so their looks of kind of shock and horror as this thing bursts out of Kane is genuine, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah, I don't think you can argue that that scene, although horrifying, is certainly an iconic scene in the whole landscape of cinema. And in at number 1, we are going with Hellraiser and the Death of Frank Cotton. Frank was this shady guy who messed around with the configuration box and basically got torn apart by the Cenobites, but manages to bring himself back to life through various gruesome stages with the help of the murderous Julia, and in the end kills his brother, played by Andrew Robinson, and takes on the skin and the form of his brother, only for the Cenobites to track him down again and finally do away with him in one of the most spectacularly gory and crazy scenes I have ever seen. And again, I saw this one young, and I'd never seen anything like it. And to this day, I've never seen anything like the death of Frank in Hellraiser. Hellraiser does a number of things. It's a really dark movie, and it takes you to a dark place. But there are things in Hellraiser that, other than the sort of sequels, but to a lesser extent, I've just never seen in any other horror movies. The look of the Cenobites, the gore in this one, the hooks in the skin, the way they pull you apart is done in such a vivid and visceral way. And Hellraiser really kind of stands out in that fashion, and that death has always stuck with me over the years as just being incredible. I can't imagine. I'd love to see behind the scenes of how they put that together. That would be really interesting. But yeah, the death of Frank is just so over the top, but horribly realistic and painful, all in one. So my number one most memorable death is Frank in Hellraiser. So let me know what you think about that, guys. That's my top 10. Let me know what yours are. I know I left off some classics here, but these are the ones that I just kind of grew up with and that I got to first. But yeah, let me know if you agree. But if not, let me know what your top 10 most memorable deaths would be. I'd be really interested to know. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.